there are tales of a mythical device harboring the power of a MediaTek Helio P60. The Miyoo P60, from the creators of the incredibly popular Miyoo Mini, have been supposedly working on a handheld with a little more oomph that uses the MediaTek Helio P60. It began life sometime last year, and many await its arrival. There have been teasers, videos, speculation, but still, the Miyoo P60 is missing in action. But what if I told you that there are many phones being powered by the specific ARM SoC, which was introduced in 2018 and ancient by tech standards? My curiosity got the best of me, and I simply couldn't wait to see just what the Helio P60 is capable of, and perhaps prepare for what is possible whenever Miyoo decides to release their new handheld. So join me, the Retro Tech Dad, as I explore the possibilities and check out a phone that is powered by the Helio P60. Let me introduce you to the UMIDIGI A9 Pro, and I purchased the specific phone off eBay for a whopping $79 direct from UMIDIGI as a renewed unit. Here's a brief glimpse of the specs, which we'll talk about more shortly. Let's crack the seal on this new-to-me device. I will say that despite it being a refurbished unit, I do appreciate that this has been nicely packaged. Is it just me, or is it just so enjoyable to peel back these films? Well worth the $79 just for that experience. Oh hey cool, there's a case included on the device, and wow, another film to peel? That's two for the price of one. Talk about value. As you can see, UMIDIGI provides a link to the world, and inside we have another SIM tool and paper manual to add to my collection. I have to say, I really like this red braided USB Type-C cable. Pretty slick, and it will be a nice addition to my cable drawer. And finally, a power brick. Okay, so let's quickly run the specs. I think it's only appropriate to get to know the phone that will be providing me with this Helio P60 experience. The UMIDIGI A9 Pro has a 6.3-inch 19.5 by 9 2340 by 1080 display. It is powered by the MediaTek Helio P60 with 8 cores. My specific model has 6GB of RAM and 128GB of storage, which is not the model that I actually purchased. Hooray for free upgrades! It has dual SIM capabilities and a micro SD tray for expandable storage. The rear camera includes a Sony sensor at 48 megapixels and a Sony 24 megapixel selfie camera. It features a 4150 mAh battery with fast charging and has Android 10 out of the box. I purchased this unit off eBay for $79. Unfortunately, the same phone is now going for $119, so keep an eye out for a sale, but thankfully there are many devices with the same chipset. Okay, so now that we know what device I'm using to check out the Helio P60, let's go over some of the benchmarking numbers available to us. As you can see, the information provided by chipguider.com pegs the Helio P60 as being slightly more powerful on paper than the Tiger T310 that is used in both the popular budget retro handheld, the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus, and the newly released Retroid Pocket 3. Now, I will be using the Retroid Pocket 3 as a way to benchmark performance in my own personal tests and base my opinion on those results. What I am trying to establish here is where a device such as the Miyoo P60, when it releases, would find itself in a very crowded market. I will begin first with my own benchmark test using Geekbench 5 and 3Mark running the Slingshot Extreme test. So first, let's see how the CPU performs in Geekbench 5. Now as you can see, based on the benchmark scores, no surprises here, the Helio P60 outperforms the Tiger T310 in multi-core performance, whereas in single-core performance, the Tiger T310 slightly edges out the Helio P60. Okay, now for some GPU testing. I ran the Slingshot Extreme test on both devices, and again in line with what we would expect from the Helio P60, it outperforms in the OpenGL ES 3.1 test with a score of 1023 to 401. Now the question remains, how does this all translate to real-world scenarios like Android gaming and emulation? Android gaming is tricky because I have one device here on Android 10 and the other on Android 11. The biggest issue is that there aren't really any solid frame counting tools like there are on other platforms such as PC. I believe Android 12 is starting to correct that with a built-in frame counter under developer options. Regardless, there are some ways we can judge performance of the Helio P60. Let's start with Gunfire Reborn, which I'm super glad I can give a little attention to this awesome first-person shooter game. Gunfire so nicely provides a built-in frame counter and really shows that the Helio P60 does in fact line up with some of the paper benchmarks we have seen. Now it's pretty difficult to match up gameplay side by side, but I thought just playing through and showing just how they both would play would give a pretty clear indication as to what kind of performance we are seeing here. Based on my observations, I'd say that the Helio P60 is giving us a very solid 15 to 20 frames per second more than what the Retroid Pocket 3 can do with identical settings. Moving on to another fantastic game, and one I had a viewer ask me about over on my Retroid Pocket 3 in-depth video, Bloodstained is another one that to me is showing very obvious performance improvements. I'd say that on the Retroid Pocket 3, there are moments when the game seems to be running fine, but there are very rough parts. Whereas over on the UMIDIGI, we can observe that the game does appear to run smoother. Just looking at Miriam, you can see that she isn't moving in slow motion and there are less stutters happening. It's by no means amazing on the Helio P60, but again, we are seeing performance gains with the chipset. On the emulation front, things start to get a little more interesting. Directly comparing Wind Waker, the P60 is struggling to match the performance of the Retroid Pocket 3. I've featured this one before, and I am particularly interested in it because the mysterious YouTube channel CN Plays showed footage of Wind Waker running quite smooth on the supposed Miyoo P60. I don't know if it's a matter of the chipset starting to throttle, but the Retroid Pocket 3 does a surprisingly better job with Wind Waker. Perhaps this has to do with the better single-core performance of the Tiger T310? What does everyone else think? Let me know down below. PS2 is another interesting one because CN Plays shows pretty smooth footage of God of War on PS2 running on the mysterious P60 device. Now I can smooth things out by using the PAL version and turning on some aggressive performance hacks by keeping the EE cycle rate at a -3 and the EE cycle skip at 3. Personally, I do not like playing PS2 like this, but regardless, I am just trying to match some of the things we have seen so far about this device. Now on the Retroid Pocket 3, the game doesn't do as well as the Helio P60, so PS2 performance could be better over here on the Helio P60. I did test a few other games and was able to run a few more 3D games than I could on the Retroid Pocket 3, like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and Downhill Domination. Again, this is by no means meant to be definitive, and I'm just kinda having some fun with the testing. On the PSP front, performance is pretty similar, maybe even a slight edge to the Helio P60. They are both running under the Vulkan API with a 2x internal resolution and auto frame skip enabled. Performance is pretty nice overall on both devices. Alright, so we've made it this far, and there are interesting things to consider here. Please bear in mind that this is by no means meant to be a definitive video for what to expect with the upcoming Miyoo device. There could very well be software tweaks to improve the performance and some other variables at play. Now, there is still mystery as to when the Miyoo P60 will actually release and at what price point. There's no denying a small device is always appealing, as can be seen by how popular the Miyoo Mini became. Now the question is, based on the performance we have seen on display here, is this a device that should be priced below the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus and 3 or at a similar price point? The reality is that anything more and the device will price itself out of existence. I think it will be interesting to see where it ends up and if they can get it under the price of the Retroid Pocket line. And if they do, I think Miyoo will be onto something here and be very competitive with what I'd say is the budget king for price to performance in the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus and 3. I guess at this point, only time will tell, and I'll have to look back and see just how close performance ended up being on the real device. With that, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this fun video exploring a chipset that could potentially power a future Retroid handheld. If you want to see more of this in the future, please let me know in the comments. I am the Retro Tech Dad, and thank you so much for watching.